you so very much for tuning in. This is huge. The Supreme Court has essentially already backed President Trump. Especially, they have defended his interpretation, essentially, of the Alien Enemies Act, but also they're about to limit or curtail the nationwide injunctions that are preventing President Trump, or not really preventing, but that are annoying President Trump and his administration. The same nationwide injunctions, and hit subscribe to this channel right now, to my super chat. Thank you so very much. If you want to talk about this or any topic within reason, your super chat support is greatly appreciated. AOC, Ron Wyden, Democrats actually told President Biden to ignore nationwide injunctions and lower court rulings less than 2 years ago. They despised nationwide injunctions. That's another reason why the court, perhaps even a liberal justice, will also limit the ability of nationwide injunctions to encroach upon Article 2 executive branch authority. The president is the commander-in-chief. It's within the Constitution. Now, you're going to hear from Greg Jarrett, Jonathan Turley, President Trump in a second. Hit subscribe if you're new. I want to just read you this. So troubling, Greg Jarrett says district judge is defying the Supreme Court over Trump deportation gangs. They're already defying the Supreme Court in terms of precedent. But I want to just show you really quickly before we get to the Supreme Court already looking at a major case right now as we speak. How is Judge? Okay, there are more than 600 active federal trial judges divided over 90 districts. Geographically dispersed districts are broken into divisions. Some divisions have only 1 or 2 judges. So, as it stands, one of over 600 federal judges in 90 different regions of the country can issue a nationwide injunction encroaching upon the executive branch. That is not constitutional. And the Supreme Court, we're going to hear in a second, is about to back President Trump in a huge victory. Democrats were relying on federal judges to prevent Trump. They're actually promoting the interests of President Trump's administration. Thank God, they're so utterly inept. Trump's adversaries are so inept, they only make him more influential, thank God, because he's enforcing laws that Democrats should have enforced. Okay? And God bless, like I say, God bless all the good, awesome, amazing, beautiful, like 99.9% of families and individuals and people from Venezuela, from El Salvador, from Mexico, from the Middle East. The most beautiful, wonderful, amazing people from these areas of the world. And almost all are absolutely wonderful. But we're talking about national security. We're talking about a country that sent an organization here. That falls under the Alien Enemies Act. That's why you don't need due process. But hit subscribe. Check this out. This is a huge victory upcoming, essentially already took place, but upcoming from the Supreme Court to President Trump.
On the battle between the executive and the judicial branch, joining me now is Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett and Peter Schweitzer, the president of the Government Accountability Institute. Gentlemen, great to have you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. I want to get your reaction to the AG. Greg.
Well, the AG is right about a variety of things, particularly, these federal judges who are issuing temporary restraining orders. Democrats and liberal groups have sprinted to their favorable venues and preferable judges. It's known derisively as judge shopping. It is highly unethical. It should be made illegal, which is why Senator Hawley is introducing a bill to stop it and also rein in these district court judges who abuse their very limited jurisdiction.
They don't have the jurisdiction nationwide. There's nothing in the Constitution that says one judge throughout the country can limit the executive branch authority that gives the president the ability to enforce laws or become commander-in-chief. Article 2 is different from Article 3 of the Constitution. AOC and Ron Wyden were literally saying the same exact things as President Trump, Pam Bondi, Greg Jarrett, everyone in Trump's administration. They were saying the exact same things when it pertained to a pill, okay, that affected, it was a topic that they're very passionate about. That there was an injunction from a Texas judge, a conservative, and AOC said it was, and Senator Wyden said that it was unethical, unconstitutional, and that Biden should ignore the lower court. And you will hear AOC in a couple of minutes. But check this out. It's not only unconstitutional. What the Democrats have done is they're going to strengthen President Trump even further. They're so utterly inept that they lost the immunity case trying to imprison Trump on a speech, making the presidency even more influential and powerful. Now they're going to ensure that every one of his executive orders can be implemented without these lower courts stopping him. They don't even know what they're doing, which is absolutely hilarious, but let's continue.
Many of these injunctions against Trump have one common denominator, Maria: Democrat-appointed judges.
That's right.
They are exceeding their authority. They're contorting the law. They're usurping the power of the president, violating the separation of powers. The judiciary is a co-equal branch of government, not a superior branch. And the role of federal judges, created by Congress, by the way, needs to be revised, better defined, and circumscribed. They are issuing a ridiculous number of these universal injunctions well beyond their district authority and driven, I think, by political bias and personal animus toward Trump.
Peter,
the Trump DOJ is not even saying that these judges don't have power. The Trump DOJ is saying just limit the authority to the jurisdiction. That's all they're saying. What's wrong with that? AOC told Biden not to listen to a nationwide injunction issued by a federal judge, a lower court judge. Now, of course, AOC and others, because they lack any coherent, they lack a value system that isn't dependent upon political utility. They will change their opinions. They will go 180 if it suits them, completely changing and altering their viewpoint, but they'll be just as passionate and apoplectic. But this is very interesting. They're actually strengthening President Trump because the Supreme Court doesn't want to be inundated with all of this. So the Supreme Court, you'll hear from Jonathan Turley, is about to give Trump a huge victory.
I want to get your thoughts on the same, but I also want to ask you your thoughts on the autopen of Joe Biden. This is an incredible disclosure that we all learned over the last 2 weeks, that President Biden had an automatic signature that whoever it was could sign his name to documents even if he wasn't there. Your reaction, are these pardons legitimate, given he may not have been in the room?
Yeah, I think just to add what Greg said on the nationwide injunctions, by the way, Harvard Law Review did a study last year on their use. There were 5 nationwide injunctions during the George W. Bush administration. There were 10 under Barack Obama, and in Donald Trump's first term, there were 64. This is an extension of lawfare. It started on the war on terrorism. They've now applied it domestically. They went after Trump personally. They're now going after his agenda. So that's really what's going on. And I think the Attorney General is taking the right posture. As to the autopen, look, it's not ultimately about the autopen. Was Joe Biden in a position to actually be making decisions? And there's lots of evidence. Remember what the special counsel Robert Hur said in his interview with Joe Biden. He wasn't really there. He had no sense of things that were going on. We had Speaker Johnson reporting that when he talked to President Biden in 2024 about a piece of legislation that he signed, Joe Biden didn't recall signing that piece of legislation. So it is an absolute legitimate question. Was the president actually making this decision?
And they do this all the time. They're like, well, other people used email. No, nobody had private servers with top secret intel on them. And then there's, so they lie by omission. Oh, well, other people used autopen. Yeah, but they were coherent. They were cognizant of what was going on, and they could speak and communicate in a coherent manner. And then you get this, The Atlantic. Oh, we were put on a chat group with the top officials. Well, okay, that's embarrassing. It's not private servers with top secret intelligence on them for 4 years. President Obama's administration had a Secretary of State for 4 years that had secret private servers. Now, of course, Democrats will scoff and mock, oh, you're bringing that up again. Oh, it's like, yeah, because if you think it's a security risk, which it is, to have an Atlantic writer on some kind of email chain or a chat group on his phone, yeah, that's not good. That's embarrassing. You want to know what's 10 billion times worse? Finding out how classified data went from the Department of Defense or the Pentagon or the State Department to Clinton's secret servers. How on earth can you transfer classified data onto somebody's 2009 cell phone, even through email? How did that even happen? That situation was a cybersecurity nightmare and a national security nightmare of biblical proportions. But again, they'll focus on, oh my God, the Trump administration put this writer, and the writer knew, the war plans. Okay, that's embarrassing. That's not good. That's not secret private servers functioning outside of the United States government, where the government apparently couldn't access the servers, but the servers had access to government information. And almost certainly there was it had to have been illegal. You can't transfer anything onto servers outside the U.S. government legally. But also, almost certainly President Obama or people in President Obama's administration allowed it to take place, which is the defense that Hillary would use. But anyway, let's continue.
Or is this a replay of what we had under the Woodrow Wilson administration, where he was paralyzed and his wife, Edith Wilson, was essentially running our government? And that's something that deserves investigation, absolutely.
Oh, that's unbelievable. Greg, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, look, autopens are not illegal by themselves. They've been used by past presidents dating back to Harry Truman and before, as long as there is consent by the signator. Well, what if you have a president who is so mentally infirm that he is incapable of consent? Then those documents are null and void. And even worse, Maria, what if operatives in the White House, knowing of the president's condition, decided we're just going to start issuing pardons and executive orders without even consulting him? That's forgery and fraud. Those are felony crimes. The problem, of course, is proof. I mean, you can't ask Joe Biden because he doesn't remember what he had for breakfast.
Yeah.
And you're probably not going to get the operatives who did it to confess to crimes. So you'd need some kind of a whistleblower who saw it, who heard incriminating statements made. That is exceedingly difficult. So it does, I agree with Peter, absolutely need to be investigated.
Yeah, well, I suspect that is also on the docket of AG Pam Bondi, by the way. This week, President Trump revoked the national security clearances of Joe Biden, of Hillary Clinton, of many others. Peter, your reaction?
So this is very interesting. There's talk about Trump possibly indicting Clinton and others. So we'll continue with this. We'll get to AOC in a second, actually backing President Trump. We'll get to Jonathan Turley talking about a Supreme Court victory that's essentially already happened on nationwide injunctions, on the Alien Enemies Act. But it's really interesting, the fact that Democrats had a person that they were so embarrassed of. After one debate performance, they removed the most popular candidate of all time, Biden. What does that tell you about the Democratic Party after he won his primary? What does that tell you? Okay, it should tell you that Democrats don't truly believe in anything they say. or do. It's just a quest for political influence and power. Let's continue.
Yeah, no, I think it's a necessary step. Security clearances have been abused massively. There are more than 1 million people that have them, and I think it needs to be trimmed down. And look, you have a problem with former intelligence officials not only injecting themselves in the political processes, as you've talked about, Maria, but they also commercialize their access to security clearances. And I think certainly it's something that could be used and abused by Bill Clinton in terms of the consultancy that he has run, WJC, for example, and others. So it's open to abuse, and I think it's high time we curtail its use. Absolutely.
I mean, you have to ask yourself, why do they need them? Kamala Harris also had her security clearance revoked. Gentlemen, great conversation. We so appreciate your time.
So this is AOC on X. Not long ago, less than 2 years ago, I believe that Biden administration should ignore the lower courts. She literally stated, so AOC always says literally, she literally stated exactly what President Trump and Pam Bondi are stating now, okay?
When you've heard the news this afternoon, a couple hours ago, what did you think?
Well, I think rulings like this, and I think we've seen from the FDA and also from activity in Congress, that some of these rulings, I think we've been preparing and anticipating for there being these egregious overreaches by members.
The word salad is unbelievable. You could just you could have answered the question already. But anyway, let's continue.
The judiciary appointed by a right-wing Republican Party whose goal for a very long time was to just pack these courts with partisan judges.
That's exactly the goal of the Democratic Party. You cheated Bernie Sanders in 2016, so President Trump was able to get, thank God, 3 conservative Supreme Court justices who protect the Second Amendment, which you would love to erase. Very important. Protect the rights of citizens. We can go on forever. You look at what Democrats have done, 60 plus injunctions, nationwide injunctions. They're the ones who are utilizing the courts right now. What happened is 2 years ago, there was a Texas judge who issued a nationwide injunction that AOC felt was unconstitutional. She then told Biden not to listen to the judge, to ignore the judge. Now Democrats are saying, what happens if Trump ignores the courts? Oh, my God.
Often underqualified or completely unqualified for their role. And so there has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that the
Biden administration should ignore this ruling. Okay, so that means the Trump administration can ignore rulings. This is unbelievable. The passion and the energy and the belief that she's on the morally correct path. AOC is a very moral, individual with, places a great deal of emphasis on ethics and morality. And she said that Biden should ignore the judge. Let's listen to it again.
Which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think
the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. Okay, then the precedent is that you ignore rulings if you don't like them. Okay, that's fine. Because Democrats cheated Bernie Sanders in 2016, so they lost the ability to get 3 Supreme Court justices who were liberal. Now it's a 6-3, well, technically 6-3. But you know what? Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts, Chevron, Dobbs, immunity, overturning the Colorado ban, January defendants, they've consistently backed Trump and given him Supreme Court victories consistently. So, and Democrats could have had 3, but they cheated Bernie Sanders, who would have been a tool of the Democratic Party anyway. He was cheated, didn't even address the fact that he was cheated. And nobody's talking about Medicare for all or single payer, or nobody's talking about Green New Deal. They're not even talking about anything. They're just focused on Tesla now, because the clapping seals of the Democratic Party, they just clap, and they just, like, if you tell the rabid, perpetually indignant Democratic base, hey, don't like this person, they won't like this person. If Elon Musk wrote a book tomorrow and he said, I don't like Trump anymore, I think he's mean, and you know what, he's a totalitarian, oh my God, the Democrats would love him. He would be the best friend of the world, and he would be in their good graces again. Oh, we love Elon Musk now. He turned on Trump. I'm buying his book. And then if Musk went back after turning on Trump and selling the book, and then, you know what, I wrote the book, and you know what, I actually take back everything I said. Oh my God, he wrote a book, we liked him after we hated him, now we don't like him again. So they dislike him now, they liked him before, they dislike him now. If he turns on Trump, they'll like him again, and then if he goes back to Trump, they'll dislike him again. Anything that they don't have, it's just they're told to dislike somebody, okay? I don't care if you watch Robert De Niro or films. I watch Robert De Niro films. If you watch The View, go ahead. If you watch Jimmy Kimmel, I don't care. The Democrats are like, you can't like anybody we don't like. Let's continue.
I think that the courts have the legitimacy, and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings.
The courts have the legitimacy, and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings.
And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts.
And what they are currently doing is engaged in an, oh God.
What they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts.
And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented erosion. I can't repeat it. It's so word salad.
Is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts. It is the justices themselves, through the deeply partisan and unfounded nature of these rulings, that are undermining their own enforcement.
So
the rulings themselves are undermining their own enforcement. The rulings are so partisan that they cannot be enforced. Yes, I agree. Trump agrees. Pam Bondi agrees. Every Trump Republican agrees. Every populist Republican, everyone who voted for and supports Trump agrees. Thank you, AOC. God bless you. The intellectual framework for President Trump's administration to do away with these absurd nationwide injunctions was so eloquently stated by AOC.
So you're saying the Biden administration should ignore this court, but what does that look like? What does that actually mean?
I think.
And God bless Anderson Cooper for stating her viewpoint again, so she then doubles down and tries to defend Biden ignoring a lower court ruling, which is hopefully the precedent of the Trump administration. Thank God.
I think the interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement, and it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether.
Yes, I like that.
Or not to enforce such a ruling. But the thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement, and it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
But
that was so eloquently stated. It was brilliant. And I think that AOC is a brilliant, intelligent individual, and we should use the intellectual framework to ignore President Trump, if he wishes, should use the intellectual framework espoused by this brilliant Congresswoman to ignore, because the enforcement is President Trump's decision, just like she stated. Biden can choose to enforce the lower court ruling. He should just ignore it. I believe that Biden administration should ignore this ruling. So there you go. There you go.
is that, do we want to live in a world where a government can decide to ignore a federal court ruling?
Of course. I mean, I do think that it raises these important questions. And I do think that when we look at, and there are serious questions that the FDA and the Biden administration is going to have to figure out and how exactly we map this out. But on the other hand, what we are also seeing is a power grab over our courts in which the laws passed by Congress and the rules and policies passed by the executive branch now are going to require unanimous consent from 650 district court judges.
This is the best defense of President Trump's administration you've ever heard, and AOC is absolutely brilliant. Are you kidding me? I agree with her 100%. You're going to allow what? You have to have a unanimous consent of 600 judges? Just here, Brennan Center, right here, 600 judges in 90 different regions of the country. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And AOC says it perfectly. She says it in a brilliant manner. Thank you, AOC. I mean, she should work for President Trump's administration. It'd be fantastic.
Many policies passed by the executive branch now are going to require unanimous consent from 650 district court judges, many of which are appointed with even, the American Bar Association saying that they're completely unfit for the role.
If the American Bar Association says conservative judges are unfit to become judges, then they should just resign. I mean, even this liberal or this organization run by lifelong Democrats says so. But anyway, I think AOC brilliantly stated it. It's the best. And this is why the Supreme Court is going to essentially already side with Trump. But if you according to Greg Jarrett, there's precedent. But this is why, because you have liberals and Democrats who don't like these injunctions either. Yet again, they're going after Trump through lawfare and then making him stronger.
Early constitutional attorney and Fox News contributor, and Carrie Urban, Fox News legal editor. Great to have both of you with us. You're hearing what's going on in there. Jonathan, let me start with you. What's your reaction to this back and forth?
Well, to say that tensions are high is an understatement. The problem here is that the Trump administration has some good arguments, but it shouldn't overplay its hand. For example, they're arguing that this is what's called non-justiciable, that simply the court doesn't have a role here. That may be an argument that will sway some judges, but it's not an argument that allows you to ignore court orders. And so they have to be very careful here to make those arguments on appeal, not to treat them as a dead letter because you don't recognize the authority. Now, having said that, a lot of these judges have, in my view, exceeded their authority, including the imposition of national injunctions. And on that, I think that the Trump administration has a winning case to make.
There was also the issue of a negotiated deal between the country of El Salvador, President Nayib Bukele, and President Donald Trump of the United States of America. A judge does not have the right to decide foreign policy or to question the enforcement of existing laws combined with a negotiated foreign policy decision between two countries. You had officials in El Salvador and officials in the U.S. This is national security. This is foreign policy and national security. A judge cannot stop the commander-in-chief from engaging in his Article 2 powers within the Constitution as commander-in-chief.
Various Supreme Court justices, including Justice Kagan, have objected to these district court judges issuing these national injunctions. So I think that there's good arguments here, but there also has to be some care. Part of the problem the Trump administration had the first term is a lack of discrimination on targets. They have to be careful on what they want to fight on and what they want to yield on.
Carrie, obviously we're waiting to see if they try to invoke the state secrets. One of the central issues here, as I understand it, is whether or not
there was a tie. So if you're going to use this Alien Enemies Act from 1798, you have to prove that there's some sort of invasion from another country, and you have to prove that it's tied to the government of that other country. Now we've had very strong.
So President Trump's administration stated that there's a lot of evidence another country sent an organization here to harm national security. That's why the Alien Enemies Act was evoked. That's why there's no due process.
Suggestion from the president and others related to this that they believe that Maduro controls TDA to some extent and that he wants them to destabilize the country. Do they need to prove that, or did they make a mistake in evicting these people in this manner and then having to prove that?
Well, DOJ has been arguing that Tren de Aragua is effectively a front for the Maduro regime. Right. And one of the things they point to is that in Venezuela, when Tren de Aragua is in a particular area, they effectively set up a quasi-government over the territory. And so they point to that and say, look, this gang is ruling a lot of Venezuela. And then, of course, in 2022, when Joe Biden was effectively ignoring our border laws and the like, they came pouring over, and we've seen the effects of that. You know, I will say this, Martha, about the state secrets doctrine, and on that, the judge gave the Department of Justice a Tuesday deadline as to whether they're going to actually invoke that or not. They're going to have to file a declaration as if they're going to do that. You have to remember that State Department official, a career guy who's been at the State Department since 1971, he filed his own declaration last weekend. And he said that what we saw over the weekend with these planes was the result of weeks of sensitive negotiations between top State Department officials, including Secretary of State Rubio, with the governments of El Salvador and Venezuela. And that's not something this judge was a part of, nor would he have access to. So part of me wonders about those conversations they were having with those governments, and if they are using that in part to suggest they may in fact invoke this doctrine so they don't have to reveal everything the judge wants them to. Now, of course, he thinks it's a pretext. He says, just answer my questions about the timing. But it's certainly an interesting situation to keep watching.
Yeah, you know, just on the broader strokes here, Jonathan, I think that most Americans look at this and they don't understand why we would want to keep gang members like this in the country. Certainly the president has said that. Why would anyone want to keep these people out if they're dangerous to the country, or to bring them back if they are dangerous to the country?
No, that's obviously a concern for many Americans. The fact is that we can get these individuals out of the country. I think that the Trump administration will ultimately prevail on most of these efforts at deportation. The only question is the manner in which it occurs. And the issue with state secrets is an example of that, and how you approach this. I've litigated state secrets cases from the other side from the government. And this is an argument that the government tends not to make in court, because the state secrets privilege or doctrine is so important to them. They don't want to risk it. There's a lot of debate on the edges of how far it extends, what you need, whether you need a cabinet level official to issue these declarations. I'm not too sure the prize is worth the powder here to put the state secrets doctrine at risk. So this is one of the issues that I'm concerned about in how this is unfolding. There's always a danger of doubling down on bad hands. Ultimately, the Trump administration will win this game in terms of deportations. This is well within Article 2 authority. I think the president is correct. I think that many judges have overstepped their bounds, but they have to be careful.
So the judges have overstepped their bounds on the Article 2 authority. They can't. The Article 3 talks about the judges, the judicial system, and lower court judges in the Constitution. Article 2 talks about the powers of the presidency, the executive branch. So they're co-equal. One is not more powerful than the other. So President Trump has the right to negotiate a deal with El Salvador without a lower court judge preventing or stopping or impeding a foreign policy decision. Okay, Congress might be able to do that, but the Democrats, they don't pass any legislation. For from single payer to Green New Deal. They're not passing anything that they care about. They just pass spending bills. But anyway, the point is they're not, Congress would be the only way to stop President Trump or any president from issuing executive orders that a political party doesn't like. The federal judges, Trump can literally ignore, like AOC and Ron Wyden stated. They can't enforce the national injunctions, the nationwide injunctions. The only consequence or recourse is political. The result would be that one would think the electorate, the American people, would be so outraged that President Trump isn't listening to these lower court judges. The same lower court judges AOC said to ignore. But the consequence would be political, that, J.D. Vance would lose because in 2028, because people were so livid and indignant that the Trump administration wouldn't listen to these lower court judges. That obviously is not taking place. You can hear all this nonsense. Oh, most people don't like Elon Musk. That's not true. The public opinion polls are complete nonsense. Trump had the lowest favorability ratings, and he's a two-term president. So a lot of these favorability ratings are just marketing and public relations for Democrats. We can go on forever with that. A lot of these polls are meaningless and complete nonsense. You have a public relations monstrosity leveling its ire and its vitriol against somebody. Of course, then you're going to get a poll that shows the person is not as liked as he used to be. But anyway, let's continue.
Careful here, not to put things at risk that they don't have to put at risk in court.
Yeah. So, Carrie, the argument is that there are other ways that they could have removed them that would have saved them this headache with the courts. But you brought up earlier today a similar confrontation between Bill Barr the first time he was Attorney General. This was under George W. Bush with the boat people. Bush wanted to protect the country essentially from this invasion, whatever. I don't know if he used that word at the time of Haitian boat people. How did that work out? And is there a lesson in that for this today?
Well, there's some comfort to be taken from that, right? There's nothing new under the sun. These have been issues that have been playing out for years. But yes, then Attorney General Bill Barr, I believe he had 3 stays issued against the Department of Justice as they were trying to find a way for these boat people to not enter the country illegally via these boats. And ultimately, he won at the Supreme Court. And so we'll see what happens here.
I'm going to jump in. Carrie, Jonathan, thank you very much.
So you will hear Greg Jarrett talk about how there's Supreme Court precedent pertaining to all of this, and that the Supreme Court already essentially ruled on this.
Judges think as far as this case, we're going to continue to arrest public safety threats and national security threats. We're going to continue to deport them from the United States. The Alien Enemies Act was actually a federal law. It's a statute enacted by Congress and signed by a president. Now, that's under litigation. But put that aside, we still have Title VIII authority to remove illegal aliens from the United States.
Do they have any due process at all?
Look, due process. What was Lake and Ronnie's due process?
Good point. Border Czar Tom Homan vowing to continue deportations, never saying he was going to defy the court, by the way. This ahead of a hearing today on the Trump administration's decision to send migrant gang members to a maximum security prison in El Salvador. Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett joins us now. Greg, it looks like first off, we're moving to a different court on the freezing of the flights, but we're still in the lower court. With the judge who wants to know more details about why those flights took off on last Saturday. Yeah. So can you update us from how you see this going?
Well, the district court judge, Brian, his name is Boasberg. He set a court hearing for tomorrow, but the higher appellate court has a hearing today to decide whether to toss out the judge's temporary restraining order on these deportations. So for now, the appellate court has jurisdiction, but it really depends on what they do today. What's so troubling, I think, about Boasberg's restraining order is that he is defying the Supreme Court. which reviewed Harry Truman's use of the Alien Enemies Act after World War II ended. And the High Court said that not only is the act constitutional under the law of the land, it is not subject to judicial review by any judge. So when a president invokes it, no judge, no court can ever intervene, not even the Supreme Court, because Congress gave the president the exclusive power that is purely political to make decisions on national security and foreign policy. Well, Boasberg is duty-bound, Brian, as a lower court judge to follow the ruling of the highest court, the Supreme Court, and butt out. And yet he is brazenly ignoring the Supreme Court precedent.
So, Greg, what is...
So there's already Supreme Court precedent.
Is the answer here? The appellate court, you were just telling me in the break, is not necessarily going to be friendly to the Trump administration. So they'll keep, once these both of them make a decision, they'll keep moving up this entire case, right?
Yeah, I think so. This is, again, strictly a TRO hearing today in the appellate court, temporary restraining order. Although I suspect they may start talking about other things, like has this judge has exceeded his authority on other grounds, which I think he has. It's not a friendly court. It's an uphill battle for the Department of Justice on behalf of President Trump.
Right.
So if they uphold the TRO, it goes back to the trial court judge. We see what he does. And then on the merits, it'll be appealed by the Department of Justice, again, going to higher and higher courts. Eventually, right, I think, to the U.S. Supreme Court, Brian.
So let's look at the bigger picture. Our injunction numbers are unbelievable. If you look at the past presidents, we got George W. Bush with 6, Obama with 12, Biden with 14. In their entire administrations, Trump, too, has got 15 already. So is there something cooking in Congress to stop this trend and actually give a administration a chance to implement their policy?
There is, because Democrats and liberal groups have been sprinting to favorable venues and preferable judges.
This is exactly what AOC and Ron Wyden were saying. And this is why Trump has already won this. You have Democrats who actually have President Trump's viewpoint on this. They don't like nationwide injunctions either. But they don't have Congress. And even if they had Congress, it would be like they're so inept at governing. We saw that the past 4 years. That's why Trump won the popular vote, every battleground state, the House, Senate. He has the Supreme Court. And now he's able to actually gain momentum over nationwide injunctions. He's going to get to the Supreme Court. Greg Jarrett and others have stated he's already basically won in the Supreme Court. But the only way to stop President Trump, if you're a Democrat, would be through Congress, but they might not even get midterms. They are so utterly dysfunctional. Now they're after Elon Musk and Tesla, which is every liberal on the planet that has an EV almost certainly has a Tesla. So it's really hilarious.
Where the result is preordained in their favor against Trump. It's known derisively as judge shopping, completely unethical. And many of these restraining orders have one common denominator. They're ordered by Democrat-appointed judges, exceeding their authority, contorting the law to do it. They are essentially usurping the power of the president and violating the separation of powers. It's got to stop. Congress can act. Senator Hawley is prepared to introduce a bill to limit the authority of these judges. Because remember, Congress created the court system and the judges, and they can limit and circumscribe their authority.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. You know what? It should, you want to have fairness, but this just seems to be politics at play, using the court system for the wrong reason.
So it's going to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court essentially already backed Trump on this with precedent. And Trump's now going to be able to circumvent nationwide injunctions because the Supreme Court will limit the ability of judges, maybe the injunction will be only within the jurisdiction, which is what should happen. If you're a federal judge in one of the 90 regions of the country, why should you be able to issue a nationwide injunction? How does your authority span beyond your region that you're a judge within? So I don't get that, but let's continue. Hit subscribe if you're new, ladies and gentlemen.
Former federal prosecutor and House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey, always good to see you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Do you agree with the Vice President on what he said there, Trey?
I agree on scale. I think the scale is larger than we've ever seen it before. But, Martha, I was on the floor of the House when Obama said, I'll do it with or without you. That's not a really great thing to say in a tripartite republic where you have three different branches. And, of course, Republicans took Biden to court over student loans and COVID mandates and vaccine mandates. So it's not new that the party in opposition, if you can't win at the ballot box, it's not new that you go to the courthouse. Where I do agree with the Vice President is on a couple things. The scale is larger. If you look at there's a lot of judge shopping going on, Martha. There's a reason they picked the districts. The real question I have, Vice President Vance has been in two of the three branches. It was his old branch, the Senate, that confirmed this judge 96-0. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not great with math, but that's pretty overwhelming. 96-0, this judge was confirmed. So if you don't like judges, why don't you do a better job vetting them on the front end and not wait until they issue a ruling that you take exception to?
So in terms of the way this law is being used,
that was also, I believe, when the Republican Party had a lot more never-Trumpers and Republicans in name only. But, ladies and gentlemen, here's the issue. The Supreme Court has already ruled on this during the Truman administration, backed the president's ability to utilize the Alien Enemies Act. And now they're going to also back President Trump on nationwide injunctions. They do not want nationwide injunctions. The Supreme Court does not want to be inundated with a constant stream of litigation and cases pertaining to nationwide injunctions. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. Thank you, everybody. I will see you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Great live stream.